Hello, everybody. My name is Wizomi,
And my name is Tomato.
and together we are
Jongers by nature.
All right. Welcome to episode 2. It's been a long time coming. I hope you're all very happy to see the return of your two, hopefully, favorite Fukumoto and Mahjong podcast enthusiasts. So, today we want to start off with tying off a few loose ends of our discussion in part 1. So if you haven't watched part 1, this is your indicator. Go and check it out. And then we'll get into a very interesting and polarizing topic, because we will be talking about our top 3 favorite Fukumoto works today. So we have actually not revealed them to each other just yet. So I'm looking forward to some heated discussions. But first, a quick word from our sponsor.
So, today's episode is sponsored by Hazeso Eats. Introducing Hazeso Eats, the new delivery service that allows you to eat your greens on the go. Hazeso Eats. The ladies love it when you eat your greens and endure. But anyway, back to the matter at hand.
Yes, the ladies absolutely love it. Okay.
I can tell you that they love it.
Tying up the loose ends from last time. Maybe you want to go into what the main discussion point is.
Of course. So at the very end of the last episode, we were talking about what features make Fukumoto manga distinctive and classic. And one thing which I think we forgot to mention was something that appears in not all, but the vast majority of Fukumoto manga, starting off the manga with one punchy sentence. So just off the top of my head, for Akagi, it was all I wanted was change. For Kaiji, it was the future is in our hands. For Buraiden Gai, it was stand alone, and then saying a sentence about how this world is we are destined to, we are seeds destined to break the world with our growth. So stand alone, and then he's surrounded by the detective and all the police officers. Do you remember any off the top of your head? There was for Kurosawa as well. It was there is no such thing as being emotionally moved. Can you remember any off the top of your head? Wizomi?
For Tonegawa, it's I'm bored. I'm bored. And it then goes into Hyodo going on a little tangent about how he always does that. Regular life can't give him kicks anymore, and that you need to have sick, cruel games that he enjoys. I mean, it almost is a little spoof to how the regular Fukumoto works start with something very serious, and because it's of course going in the gag direction.
Well, that is what the Tonegawa manga is. It's just sort of a little bit of a parody of itself. It's obviously, as everyone knows, a bit more humorous and light-hearted.
Yeah, but that's why I honestly love it. So it could be that we went into it just very briefly, but I really like that you also explicitly remember so many of them. Is just an indicator that it is really something that is iconic for his works. I was quite surprised that for Nikaido Hellgolf, it doesn't start out with one of these classic black panels with just a white text in front of it. But yeah, it is still starts off with some inner monologue from Nikaido himself. But I mean, the entire series is a lot of Nikaido having his inner monologue.
Yes.
But maybe to not go too much into the topic of... I mean, maybe we will be talking about Nikaido today. Who knows?
Oh, really?
But I think this is a good time for us to transfer over to the main topic for today's discussion.
Right.
And
which is
top 3 Fukumoto works, and I think this is also the point where I can return my notes to myself. I don't think you will be needing them anymore. I don't want you to do any peeking. And to start things off, I thought it would be a good idea to list some honorable mentions, because honestly, it's a painful choice to reduce it down to 3. So if there's anything that you want to give some extra love to that did not make it into your list, this is the point.
Okay, I think I'm gonna have to deviate from your intended format a little bit
Oh, sure.
because I have let's call it a short list. For me it's gonna be a short list. I don't think I can pick a top three and then, beneath that are the honorable mentions. I think for now I'm gonna have to pick a short list of maybe five, maybe six, and through discussion maybe we can narrow it down to
Okay.
the top three and which ones are the honorable mentions just beneath it, like you said.
So we're gonna be productive today. Not only will
Yeah,
we be discussing this, but maybe it will lead to some new revelations and some
perhaps.
distinct
Yeah,
rankings.
that's the nice thing about podcasting. You
Yeah.
you never know what the guy is gonna say next.
Absolutely. Okay. Who do you want?
Well, I think
should start.
so. I think because you've already thought about it, I'm guessing you already have some honorable mentions in mind.
Don't let the viewers know that I've thought about it more than you. It's okay.
We can cut that part in the edit.
Yeah.
So maybe you take it away.
Yeah. So, I mean, I teased it already a little bit, but I feel like it's far too soon to make any verdicts. But for the first honorable mention, I do want to include Nikaido Hell Golf.
Okay.
I am a little biased myself because ever since reading Zero Part 2 and seeing that little golf sequence, because I do play golf myself, I was like, damn. Even though the actual, let's say, gamble in Zero Part 2 is a little bit silly. I don't know if you even remember it in much detail. It is just a few chapters, and it's like about Zero abusing the fact that the grass is a little bit
Yes.
slippery and
And saying we'll start at 5. I actually meant 5 a.m.
It is quite silly.
Psych.
I will not be putting 0, 1, or 2 in my honorable mentions or in the top 3. I kind of like it, but it is much more silly than a lot of other Fukumoto works. But
Yeah.
When I read that golf part, I was like, damn, I kind of want to see more of that. And all things considered, there has not been too much golf just yet in Nikaido Hell Golf. But the entire character of Nikaido I find quite endearing. I think it's a big tease that the little shadowy figure has still not reappeared. At the beginning I thought it was just going to be about this guy, so I'm hoping for a big comeback, but it would also be very silly if it just never comes up again.
I'll tell you one thing that I really like about Nikaido. I'm not sure if I'd put it in my short list, but I mean, since you've brought it up, I really do like the way that just a few chapters at a time, it moves forward in time. A lot of Fukumoto manga seem to be kind of frozen within a certain time period.
Yeah.
So just as an example,
Akagi.
the Hanchan that lasted, what, 17 years? Took that long to write? Or was it 20 years? I don't know.
Yeah. 2 presidential elections.
Yeah. Well,
3?
in 10 as well, they have that, that whole showdown. Like they have, one match and then a few
Yeah.
weeks later is the next match, but it's, roughly in the same time period, even though it takes
Yeah.
sort of years and years to put out. And then you have the time skip at the end. 9 years later,
Yeah.
Hiro is working a job as a salaryman, and then he sees that advert in the newspaper. So there's like a big time skip at the end of 9 years. And then for Kaiji, I think it sort of roughly happens within, again, it's not all about the same night, like
Yeah.
everything happens in one night, but it does stay roughly within the same time period. It was being written originally in the late 90s and early 2000s, and yet it's been worked on for 20 years. We're now in the 2020s, and the Kaiji story is still in, I think it's in the 90s, isn't it? It's still in
Yes.
1990 something. So one thing I really found interesting about Nikaido is the time skip in that
Yeah.
you go, 1 or 2 chapters, and then a year has passed, and you see that character development, if you can even
Yeah.
call it. Maybe character development is too strong of a word, but it's interesting to it kind of makes it feel more real to see, just a few chapters pass and you see, it's another year,
Yeah.
his time is running out. He's getting more old, more withered. He's,
Withered.
he's losing, because in the first chapter, you saw that, what was his story? Who was Nikaido? He was the guy who failed 10 years in a row. And it was interesting how it didn't just stay there.
Yeah.
But okay, so a few chapters later, 1 year has passed. He's failed 11 years in a row. It just keeps going and going, and it feels more and more real rather than just a kind of static.
Real
Oh,
and
this
dreadful.
is the guy who failed 10 years in a row, and that's his story. That's his like catchphrase.
And that's what I
It's-
was thinking it would be at the beginning, that it was gonna be okay. It's a guy who failed 10 years in a row,
Yeah.
and now it's like about his way of clawing himself back up out of there. It's what I was expecting. But honestly, at this point, I don't think he will be a pro golfer at the end of the series. I don't think it will go in this direction. But this is why I will only, even though it is super interesting to talk about, why I limit it to an honorable mention, because we need to see it to the end.
Okay.
So then, and I think this will be a nice, let's say, way to talk about some of your picks also. The two other honorable mentions that I have are explicitly Kaiji Part 3 and 5. So,
Okay.
One Poker Hand and Minefield Mahjong.
Really?
What? You're saying that I'm just putting them as honorable mentions and not as,
okay.
or where does this really come from? Okay, I'm curious.
Okay, well, hold on. I think I need to make 2 points. So first
Yes,
of
please.
all, I think this is going to be a lot harder for me
Yeah.
if I have to split up Kaiji into its individual
You don't have to.
arcs.
You don't
I
have
think
to.
in my case, I won't do that. I think I'll consider Kaiji to be one thing.
Yeah.
And is there anything else? What about Ten and Akagi? Because they're connected. They have that,
Oh, that's
character.
two different series. That's two different.
Yeah,
It's like,
I think
yeah,
I'll agree
yeah,
with you
yeah.
because I don't like Akagi.
Oh, what are these hot? And what's next? Did you also say, oh, because you don't like One Poker, or you
Right,
don't like
wait.
Minefield Mahjong?
Okay, so like I said, I was going to make 2 points.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first point was, I think I'll consider Kaiji to be one thing in my
Yeah.
case. The second thing is, I'm curious about, actually, maybe now is a good time to ask,
Yeah.
what criteria, what goes into you considering something to be, an honorable mention or in the top 3? Because
Yes.
in my case, I think if a manga is just fun and enjoyable to read, they have like a bit of mahjong action, it's like boom, 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 goombel, goombel, goombel. Someone loses their finger and screams "Shinitakunai," then that's fun, But I don't consider that to be necessarily something meaningful. I think for my top 3, and indeed even the short list, I think I'm gonna exclusively have manga which somehow I consider to be meaningful and thoughtful and, maybe a little bit philosophical,
Yeah.
interesting in that way, not just entertaining. That's how I will be choosing my top 3.
Is that why you were so like shocked about Kaiji Part 3 and 5 being
I wasn't
mentioned
shocked.
here?
I was just a bit disgusted.
I mean, when thinking about Kaiji Part 3 and Muraoka, it's okay to be disgusted because it's a
No,
greasy sleazeball of all time.
disgusted. He's like the coolest guy ever. I love him.
I love him too, but for me, so of course this is also where tastes and what defines peak go apart, and it differs from person to person.
There's a certain person who really has a taste for Muraoka. Do you know who I'm talking about? Okay, we won't talk about it.
Okay,
we won't talk about
it.
it.
I think I have an idea, but let's not call out too many people in our in our podcast episodes. But I have an idea. But what I wanted to say is, for me, I love it when something is very entertaining. The meaningfulness is, of course, also like it makes it more feel it more like a art with true meaning. But for me, when I read something and I find it incredibly entertaining, that's what I signed up for. It's a big reason why I read. For me, it's not such a straight split that I say, okay, just because I enjoy it leisurely, that means I can't consider it as peak. For me, it's like on equal ground, so I don't have this strong opinion. And
Right.
for Kaiji Part 3, it doesn't make too many bold statements, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I guess not.
It is mainly, like, mostly honestly set up for the following arcs, and it gets a little bit deeper than with Kazuya Hen.
Well,
and this,
I would cut in that there is like maybe a little bit of a meaningful angle when we explore. If you remember these flashbacks to Muraoka's life, that everything he did, he took the shortcut. He
but
took the easier exam and whatnot.
But that's like really shallow.
I know.
All things considered. But you're right. We should give it to that. But the reason why I like it so much that I put it in the honorable mentions, that it's just fun to read. The dialogue, interaction,
True.
and just seeing how far and to what level of patheticness Muraoka will go to win, and then also the interaction later on between Kaiji and Kazuya in One Poker is the reason why I really enjoy them, and I put them just below my top 3, and it would have felt blasphemous to not include any Kaiji in this discussion. People would have come with pitchforks and go for me if I don't include it somehow. I love Kaiji with all my heart, and I really hope Fukumoto will continue it soon. But yeah, this is what just barely didn't get into the top 3 for me. So now I'm curious, maybe we can transit into like your, let's say, lower end of the shortlist, because I feel like you may have stronger opinions for what number 1 is.
No,
not even.
I don't actually.
Okay, then
I tend to be like that. I find it very difficult to pick an absolute favorite out of something, like let's say songs or bands within a certain genre, or like we're talking about now, manga and anime. Which is your absolute favorite? I find it hard to pick, to be honest, but I do tend to have a few favorites. It's like, if you had a kid, like, would you have a favorite child? And if you did, would you admit it?
Fair points you're making. I think
I'm just playing. Obviously, it's different.
Yeah, no. Pick a random point in your shortlist, and we'll start from there.
Oh, just one at a time?
I mean, whatever you feel is best. You can also, some are relating to each other. Then feel free to...
Okay.
But for me, I will, when we get back to my picks, I'll build up the drama a little bit. And
fine. So maybe in the interest of building up the drama, maybe I'll go sort of 1 or 2 at a time instead of blowing my whole load immediately. So I think I recently reread Buraiden Gai, and I did find it. I was surprised at how sort of underrated. I was like, wow, I forgot how good this is.
Interesting.
There was some, but actually now that I've said it out loud, I do think it will be at the lower end of my shortlist, because there were some good things about it, and there were some things which I think were not so strong. So let's start with the good things.
Yeah.
I really liked the characters. Well, the character of Sawai. And also, he's not there for long, but like the kind of sub-manager who gives Guy and the other biker dude he's with the sleeping drug. The guy who
the two-faced
presents himself as a meek, mild-mannered man who's sorry, oh no.
It's not the contrast between those two chapters.
It went so hard when he's holding the gun with the rubber bullet, and then the biker says, "Hey, why are you talking to us in that ordering tone?" And then that was not an ordering tone. That was an order.
And honestly, I must say, for me, I actually didn't even have the chance yet to reread it. I just read it for the first time last year, and I was shocked by the stark contrast in tone between like going from that one chapter where they get the sleeping drugs basically to like going to the real punishment facility. I was shocked with how drastic everything is going to get.
Yes.
And I don't know if I've read something comparable anywhere else, where, I mean, I feel like not in this kind of context, high school kids being in crude death game situations with the death game genre is becoming more and more popular. But that's not what Buraiden Guy is about. It is about a badass fighter kid who is full of justice. And what I'm curious about is, what is your opinion on the entire segment where they're naked and in the area where the ceiling keeps getting lower and lower, and this obeying lessons and preaches that the director of the prison gives. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know if this might surprise you, but I actually find the director himself and also his ideology to be not completely, how to put it, I'm not completely against what he was saying.
Okay, choose your next words wisely.
Well, there was something that he said which really resonated, where they were in the dog room, and I can't remember exactly what happened. I can't remember how long they'd been in there. Maybe this was just at the beginning, or maybe this was when they'd been left there for weeks and weeks and weeks.
It's also a point to forget about the feeling of time when they're there, so it's okay that you don't remember.
But something very interesting was said by Sawai, the director. So one of the kids said, "Hey, you can't do this to us. What about our human rights?" or something like that.
Yeah.
And the director said to him, "Well, you said the guy's name, his full name." So the director knows what about who's speaking to him.
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, whatever his name was, you bullied kids so badly that he couldn't come to school, and I can't remember." The word mental derangement was used, so either the kid that was bullied was like suffering from mental health problems and couldn't come to school, or maybe even was sent to a mental hospital. I can't remember exactly, but the point is, he said, what about his human rights? Your actions caused someone else to suffer immensely, and now you're here in the dog's room suffering immensely. Now, is it reasonable? Is it comparable? Maybe not, but it was an interesting point. I think.
Okay, that's a very interesting take. When I read it, I was just so appalled that I didn't even consider thinking about this. But there may be a few.
Well, when you consider how appalling some crimes are, like I think at the beginning. When the kids just come into the director's office for the first time, and the director is talking about, you have ended up here for like arson, robbery, I think rape was there as well, assault. So like these kids, some more than others some have done really bad things, something which will the victim will not be able to forget, and will find it hard to move on from. So that does, like you said, you were appalled by the dog's room and how they were treated, but consider how appalling some of the crimes were. Maybe not all of them though, but
I think I'm just
depends on the case.
I'm just overall surprised, because Fukumoto has never gone back to this, because you could write the entire story and not have it be kids but adults, and this kind of torture facility that is used, the dog's room, feels like something that Fukumoto would introduce in one of his other stories, where it's all just degenerate men, which is normally the topic, the subject that he covers.
Just men that can't pay their debts.
I find it quite surprising that he chose to focus more on let's say youth. Okay, I mean the other work is Zero, at least Zero Part 1, but
I think he was like 16 or 17.
Yeah. So you gave me some new insight on Buraiden Guy, because I was kind of not feeling it too much at the beginning, but maybe this year or next year I'll give it a reread and another shot. All I wanted to wrap this part up with is that I love the hiding in the sofa bit. It is really suspenseful. It is really tense. I think that it was my favorite part, and it's like one of the last chapters where they do that to get around, and then you have all the security people come in and look everywhere, and then you have the shots of them hiding in the sofa. It's genius.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, although part of Sawai and his message resonated with me. It's actually okay. So I'll just say I'll do the counterbalance.
Yeah.
It's obvious that Sawai is, he doesn't have the children's best interest at
Yes.
heart. He just wants to hurt them, and that was
Exactly.
when he was so again, when the kids were at his office for the first time, and he was making that speech about how, you're broken, you need to be melted down so you can become to your correct pure form and stuff like that. You could maybe think to yourself that he believes what he is preaching. I'm actually curious. Maybe I can discuss that in just a moment. Whether he truly believes, is he a true believer? Does he genuinely believe the stuff that he says? But later on, when he is gonna cut out, he lies to, what was that guy's name? Hirata.
Yeah.
The big CEO who killed his own father for the money. He lies to Hirata saying, sorry, guy has had his tongue cut out, and then he basically makes the decision to cut out a random kid's tongue that looks like Guy, and then burn his face to make think that he's Guy, and he got his face burned in a forest fire to confuse things even more. So that,
I think he just wants to torture kids. I'm being honest with you. I feel like there's
I don't know about, well, maybe, but in that case I think he was more worried about what Hirata would do to him when
of course.
So but that really showed that he wasn't like a noble person who was doing it all for the good for the
counterbalance.
He was absolutely just he liked violence. He was fine with doing those horrible things to kids, and
I think it's good that we mentioned this.
And he's willing the point is he was willing to do such a thing as a lie to save his own skin.
Exactly.
So,
I think it's good that we bring this up, not that we just say, oh yeah, there's a little bit of good in what
he's kind of based.
Okay, well, thanks for bringing that up.
Is there anything else I was gonna say? Yeah, does he really believe what he preaches?
Maybe a little bit, but if we don't, I think the story is it wants us to think about this. The story is quite short, all things considered, and we don't get enough dialogue from him.
I believe it was cancelled. It was supposed to be extended, but I can't remember the details. But I think it was supposed to go on for longer. So, because it is quite short, like you said.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's left up for discussion, just like we did just now, because the amount of dialogue we do get from him is quite limited. So,
okay.
I think, looking at the time, we should actually move on to my actual pick on number 3 to get things going with now.
In the interest of time,
exactly. So, for my top 3 Fukumoto works, on spot number 3, I have put the one and only Pen-chan.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I was thinking quite a lot, and this refers to a lot of things that we discussed at the beginning. What I really enjoy in the Fukumoto series, and it's the time skips, and it is a little bit also of the having fun in the story, but also then going into a little bit of deeper topics. Though for Pen-chan it is really on the light side. But in my top 3 I wanted to include one of those let's say awkward puberty work of Fukumoto, even though he was not in puberty by then.
I know what you mean. Trying to find his style.
Exactly. The art style is also a little bit different. It is not so streamlined just yet how nowadays all of his works have a very very style that's easy to distinguish from anything else. But back then for Pen-chan it is like a little bit more fluid. And for me, I actually in my notes I wrote down that I love the duality of having the comedy there, but then also the more serious Pen in the end, and just seeing his development from this weird kid who just says, oh, I want to jong, and who gets into all of these, let's say, gag situations. I mean, the most legendary panel of them all is where he draws the one so during the Idol concert. Let's say not the most legendary one, but this kind of humor we have at the beginning, but in the end we see him with his own sprinter parlor coming up with everything and have his love of Mahjong just truly blossom into something that in the end impresses Yamazaki and all of his other friends. And then also I'm a big fan of the dynamic between Yamazaki and Pen-chan, where for some reason Yamazaki is so fascinated by the way Pen-chan is living, and of course it drifts into gag situations, which not all of them are super funny, like when he stings like shit, and that's a whole little thing. That's like, okay, the humor is not always on point, but it's the growing pains of the early Fukumoto works.
Yes.
So in those situations it's a little bit, okay, why is Yamazaki still so obsessed with him? But that's part of it, that no matter what, Yamazaki is so is a little bit unhappy. There's something missing in this. He's missing a little bit of that juvenile vibe and outlook on life that Pen-chan has, and just this dynamic really makes me as the reader feel like Yamazaki. Maybe depending on who reads this, some people can relate more to Pen-chan and more to the big Yakuza guy. But I feel like you will be hard pressed to find someone who's so truly obsessed with just Mahjong. So I feel like it is just an observation of Pen-chan, and it's fun. It's fun, and the character dynamics are great. And this is what has solidified it as my number 3 spot. Would you even consider Pen or Tenma in this?
Tenma, definitely not. But Pen-chan, I will agree with you. It's a very nice manga. However, like I said before, I think in order for something to be considered my favorite, one of the best in my view, it has to be a little bit more meaningful. I think as far as meaningfulness goes, there's like a nice bit of wholesome slice of lifeness to it. You get to see them going about their lives, and like a little bit of reflection, like when Yamazaki was worried about how he would appear when he was going to do something. There was that moment where he got stabbed by a Yakuza, and he raised his hand and no one said anything, and that showed him that no one really cares that much, dude. But and then the ending, what was the ending supposed to be? It was like, don't be afraid to take the plunge, don't be afraid to
feel the heat
to gamble money in a risky situation.
No, I
don't know about that ending.
The ending was not supposed to be deep at all. It's just a little payoff. Actually, I haven't looked into it. I feel like it was written at a much later point in time, at least.
Maybe.
But this is just me theorizing. I didn't look it up. Maybe I should have, because the art style for the final arc is.
It did like sort of move away from those early slightly cute looking, slightly puffy
puffy
soft features, and slightly move into Fukumoto's more classic, distinctive, jagged edges.
Exactly.
You did, that metamorphosis did take place towards the end of Pen-chan.
The last thing that I have to point out before we move on to your next pick is what solidified it as worthy of the 3rd spot is that it basically has my favorite Fukumoto chapter that he has ever written in any series. It is where Pen-chan dreams of the Mahjong tiles, and the Mahjong tiles are talking about the game that they are playing, where the Mahjong tiles are playing with human properties, and this metaphor that Mahjong is just like life. At the beginning, everyone gets dealt a different starting hand. Then in the middle of it, you try your best to work with it. And what you get in the end is, of course, the result of your endeavors, but also a bit of the starting luck from the beginning. And this metaphor has stuck with me so much. When I play Mahjong myself, I always find myself drifting off and thinking, man, Mahjong is like life. And so even though there is no big underlying deep message of the series, this one chapter really stuck with me.
Yeah, I'll just mention that one chapter is also the favorite of at least one other person. I know there's at least one person who found that chapter to be
Yeah.
significant,
Yeah.
and mentioned how much they love it. That might be their favorite chapter of Fukumoto as well.
Yeah. One of the best for sure.
Yes. So I guess it's my turn now,
Yes,
huh?
it is.
So the next one I'll mention, and unlike Burai, just quickly going back to Buraiden Guy, I said that it has some good things, some bad things. I think some bad things about it were that moment where he was looking in the mirror and wow, I was faster than light.
It's like some Lucky Luke shenanigans.
Bullshit,
He's like
come on.
faster than his shadow.
Yeah, and then also that scar is a little bit cheesy, and it's
Yeah.
never really explored how he got it.
He's the boy that
What
survived.
is it like
You're a wizard.
the boy who lived?
You're a wizard guy.
You're the wizard guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one I'll mention, and yeah, unlike Buraiden Guy, I'm not sure if this will be in my lower shortlist. I think this could be potential for actual top 3. So here goes. Gin Tokin, also known as Silver and Gold in English.
Yes. Fantastic work. I was thinking of including it in the top 3 also.
Yeah.
It is. It has a little bit of everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, like you said, a little bit of everything. So it's hard to know where
Yeah.
to start.
What kicks it out for me of the top 3 is the final arc with the horse racing. That
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Yeah. Kind of. Well, that was kind of because, as you might know, the magazine that it was being
Yeah.
published in was turned into a different sort of magazine.
Yes.
But yeah, what to say about it? What made it resonate with me? I think I'm gonna be a little bit biased, because I read these when I was sort of under the age of 20. I discovered Kaiji when I was about 16,
Yeah.
and Gintokin probably when I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
The character Morita is, I think, 20 and then turns 21 if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So his youth really resonates with me. His naivety and how that was gradually stripped away as he interacts with the world more and more.
Excellent.
It's interesting how it's not, the events of the story are not kind of confined to a kind of little corner of the world. For example, just to bring up one example, Kaiji is it's sort of confined to the Tei, isn't it? You don't really see Kaiji sort of interact with different walks of life. Well, you kind of do in part 6, but I'm not gonna don't get me started on part 6. I'm not even gonna say anything about that.
I like part 6 tomorrow.
Good for you. Anyway, it's kind of interesting to see him interact with different walks of life. So, he's first at the horse races, just being a bit of a degenerate gambler, like, I thought it was going to be my lucky day. I lost. Screw it, man. And then, he goes, he gets in, he helps out with the money lending.
He should have bet on Yukio, that horse.
Whatever, yeah. Then he helps Gin out with money lending just by being, he was like acting as security there. Yeah. And then he, what was next? He sort of talks to like different people in the corporate world, Funada, the Arai, all the people involved in like the stock market, speculation, war.
Peak.
Yeah, and then sort of the art dealer. Okay.
I love the art dealer part.
Yeah.
This is like one of my honestly favorite gambles because it's so creative. I mean, Fukumoto gambles are always creative, but like the stacking of money, the money bridge. When I think of Dintokin, this is the first thing my mind goes to. It's not the mahjong with the cheating mahjong with the big money bets. It's the entirety of that painting section. Also how Morita tries to like fool the guy into thinking he's gonna get a good deal and like scouting for information, sitting there with his coffee and trying to show that he's in good cahoots with very influential people. It's brilliant.
So I think the point that I was trying to make, but slightly struggled to put into words, was that feeling of freedom and that feeling of not being restricted to one realm. Like going back to Kaiji, you know, everything that happens in one part at a time. Kaiji part 1, everything pretty much happens everything that does happen is involved with Tei. You know, he's either on the boat or he's on the, you know, the construction built by them, you know,
or the forced labor facility.
So going to part 2, you know, he's either underground or he's doing stuff in that casino. Everything happens either underground or in the casino. There's a little bit of, you know, dillying and dallying outside of that, but and then part 3 again, it's all just minefield mahjong and so on. But it's that feeling of and also, okay, so for example, Akagi, it's all to do with mahjong, right? It's
which we love.
Not necessarily. It's my point is, it's not necessarily Akagi. It's not necessarily in one place all of the time, but we are in the realm of mahjong as if it were. You know, they're always doing things to do with mahjong and everything. Akagi's whole genius is based upon this one specific tile game, you know.
I think people will argue because we do go to the other
psychology. Okay, he does. Yeah, it's to do with
dice
human
game and everything.
Right. Okay. So the realm of gambling. Then. You don't. Yeah. You don't.
Okay.
I
don't want people getting mad at you for saying Akagi is only good at mahjong, but I know what you mean. Like the main focus is, of course, the mahjong.
It's just that feel. Yeah.
But also,
maybe I'm not. Maybe I can't think of the right way to put it into words. But it's just
they
that
have
feeling.
All the same environments. The environments are all similar. Like no matter if you're like in a mahjong parlor or you're in a parlor where people play like a dice game or something, it is all like this. Yeah. It is not so. It does not invoke the feeling of freedom that I get when thinking of the paths that Morita explores.
Yeah, so that's one thing, and also the way he develops. He's like naive at the beginning.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just, you know, like working odd jobs. He hasn't made anything of himself, and then, you know, he sticks with Gin-san. And he sort of develops himself. He learns a lot of new things. At the beginning of the stock speculation war, he's like, I'm new to this. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is also confusing. But then later on, he becomes a very competent individual.
Absolutely.
A member of the team. Becomes very respected by Gin. And also, despite having stuck with them for so long, has the kind of fortitude. He's able to be true to himself to the point where he can walk away and say, that was horrible, I don't want to do that. I want to walk away from this world. So it's, I would say it's a coming of age story. I would say so. Bildungsroman, I believe the German term is.
It sounds, and the first thought, it sounds like a super hot take to say like, oh, something that Fukumoto writes is a coming of age story, but I think you're spot on. I think, and honestly, this kind, we will get to this with the other picks, I feel like this kind of character is one that Fukumoto can write best. I think the character is much different from, let's say, Kaiji, for example. Kaiji also, he starts off super naive, but he keeps, actually, starting in part 6, I feel like we see more of this, that Kaiji has actually been, numbed down a little bit in all his excitement. You see more and more often that Kaiji actually realizes, no, don't get excited, because he knows that he's just he used to be just a pathetic gambler that would always act on all his whims, and we see him control his whims more and more, and but still it does not go as far as Morita, for example, who Kaiji in part 6 still wants to go to Singapore and gamble. That is still what he wants to do in the end, so he has not progressed nearly as far. And so I think going this full span is the kind of character that Fukumoto writes really well, and we will get to another guy. I think you will also want to talk about him later on. Anything else you want to say regarding Gintokin? Or I mean, of course, there's a billion things to say.
There is a billion things to say. Maybe I find it a bit hard to put it into words, but like I said, there's that feeling of freedom, and there's also that feeling of that he's growing up and he's developing and he's learning more and more. and becoming not only more knowledgeable and more useful and powerful, but also becoming who he getting a sense of himself. You know,
Yeah.
at the beginning he sort of like doesn't know anything, but then at the end he, like I said, not just developed his power and knowledge and experience, but also was had the was able to walk away, basically. Yeah. Was able to listen to his heart, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah. My final thought regarding Gintokin is that once again, I also love this mentor-student relationship, and also this relationship of people with not say different power levels, but very different perspectives at the
Yes.
beginning. So actually, even though it is not nearly as strong, Penchan and Yamazaki is also a little bit goes in this direction. But Penchan, he does not really get melded all too much by Yamazaki.
Indeed.
But this dynamic between like the newbie and like someone who's just very well experienced and a veteran is exceptionally well executed with Gintokin. Okay. I think I will move on to my official second pick, which...
Please go right ahead.
Yeah, it will be controversial and it will be upsetting, but I am heavily biased on this pick. My number 2 favorite Fukumoto work will have to go to Shin Kurosawa. So... just as a disclaimer, I think some of the people watching know it. I am in full support of the current translation. Rinchan and Portal are doing a fantastic job, and I was so happy that they gave me the opportunity to help them and support them to basically pick up the translation again, because for me, even before the Aikido Dojo arc, I was already enjoying it quite a lot, but it wouldn't have hit the spots to, or it was not yet good enough to have me even think about putting in the top 3 before the Aikido arc, so the Aikido Dojo arc. So this is where it really started to feel like peak to me. Before that, it has a lot of highs for me. I mean, let's not talk about the beginning of Shin Kurosawa. Even my number 1 pick, the beginning is like kind of shitty and wonky. It is like Fukumoto has real troubles in just starting off his series in a good way. For Nikaido, I think the start is excellent, but for a lot of series, it's kind of weird. And the only way I can make my case sound solid is if we just like maybe forget about the first 5 chapters of Shin Kurosawa and then start from there.
Sure.
He might as well...
whatever you need to tell yourself.
He might as well just have woken up from his coma on the streets because like he was knocked out there or something, and then so that's where I have to mentally start, because I really can't justify the beginning. I must say there's a lot of very inappropriate things that I'm not a big fan of, but the entire story about the community of the homeless people where Kurosawa ends up in is something I have never read about in any piece of media. Not a single movie, not a single book, not a single comic, nothing I ever read came to describing this kind of community. Actually, one thing that came out after Shin Kurosawa, where I saw this story arc and this environment being discussed again, is Yakuza Like a Dragon. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but in one
the
of
video
the
game.
Yeah, exactly. In one of the first chapters, it is right at the beginning. It is where Ichiban, the main protagonist, meets one of his mates. He's betrayed by his Yakuza father, basically, and he's shot and finds himself waking up again in a dumpster, and there's a few homeless people and this community that start nursing him again, and you basically start out as a homeless bum, and then the entire thing is like an RPG where instead of actual job classes you get actual jobs, and that's how you fight. It's a great game, the Like a Dragon series, but not to go too much into that. I just love this kind of environment and this community being explored, because it's somewhat of a taboo topic. People are afraid of depicting this kind of situations, or at least talking about it for a long time. In Kaiji, you do have a few chapters that explore like the past of Chang and Mario, for example. But to have a work really just concentrate about the life of a homeless guy is just new and refreshing. But that's not what makes Shin Kurosawa peak for me. The story starts to get real good during the Che Guevara arc, where the guy comes and it brings up the moral dilemma of the Che Guevara bringing the expired bento to the homeless people.
Yes.
And the entire conflict is just something so unique that you would not be able to really explore in any other kind of environment. And normally Fukumoto loves to talk about and also of course dive into taboo topics, but it more goes into the direction of the Yakuza and that scum of the earth and how people are tortured and treated that way in the underground. But the homeless community is something that I'm not going to argue that probably this kind of underground facility also exists in real life, but much more visible is these homeless communities. So yeah, it just intrigues me that Fukumoto decided to drive the story in this way. It's also goes in a much different direction than the original Kurosawa, which is also excellent, which also deserves a spot in my honorable mentions.
Yeah.
It is much more meaningful at the begin or throughout. But some of the later comedy of Shin Kurosawa, explicitly the American arc, how I like to call it, of the Gas brothers, Gas and Gus, I find incredibly funny. Maybe my humor is just shit, and I admit it. It is not the best, but I don't want to say I relate to the American guys, but because I study in Asia, right, and coming there and interacting with different cultures, I don't relate at all with these Americans. Maybe I also just find it very funny. Man, yeah, I'm digging myself a hole right here that I'm not able to get out of. I should focus on the Aikido arc.
Yeah, just talking about the comedy. I do find Shin Kurosawa very funny at times.
Yeah, it is.
I think my favorite. I don't know. This is very specific. I don't know if people will be able to picture this in their heads. But like I think my favorite, most funniest, even though it's not particularly like smart or anything, but my favorite moment in Shin Kurosawa, or like the most funniest moment for me was when there's that bakery. I forget the name of the bakery, but there's two young ladies there working there. And they're being all sweet, like manager, I made a cake called the Meadows at 6, and then and the manager is like putting on a smile, being nice, but in his head the thought bubble is saying like, God, they're so annoying, and he's like being so nice to these two young ladies and like trying to calm them down. They're being like a little bit petty towards each other, and then a young man comes in and he's like, manager, I've made something new. I call it what was it? Chizu keiku. So like a play on words. Cheese cake. But Chizu is a prefecture in Japan. And he's like and he's just the manager flips completely. He's like, "What the hell were you thinking? Are you retarded?" And then the guy like he's like closing his eyes, trying not to cry. And then he goes to the bin outside and he angrily throws it away.
and then it gets to the discussion where they're like trying to get different parts.
Exactly.
Which is just so random, but. On it, it's the kind of thing I would...
For me it's just the way the manager flips from his like fake niceness to just what the hell, just being so direct. Like, what the hell were you thinking?
I may need to gather my thoughts a little bit more clearly on Shin Kurosawa, because it's quite tricky to you would also need to dance around a lot, because some things are just not so funny, but then you have these things which are just laugh out loud moments. And I also have like, it's it's so stupid that it's funny. Talking about the Americans arc, you have the two Americans being boated with this rowing boat to this little island where they're then about to experience the true wabi sabi, and but then the boat starts to burn, and they're just like, oh, is this the Hanabi fireworks that everyone talks about? And it's just so stupid that it is. I don't know if Fukumoto intended it to be funny because it's so stupid, but the comedy hits, and it hits different. But what mainly intrigues me about Shin Kurosawa is just, and this is where I'm so biased, we had this series which was dormant for such a long time and which was stopped being translated just before its best arc. So it is literally the equivalent for me of the meme of the guy that goes and tries to go for the diamonds but stops right before he hits them. And the Aikido Dojo arc and the characters of Koinosuke and Kanbayashi. Kanbayashi is just one of my favorite Fukumoto characters of all time. For me, he gives off similar vibes as Muraoka from Kaiji.
Okay.
They are both...
So tell us more about it.
Yeah, both of them are super slimy grease balls, and Kanbayashi is actually like the puppeteer. At the beginning, you think, oh, it's all Koinosuke who's trying to inflate his ego, but as the chapters go on, you actually learn about Koinosuke, and he's actually just incredibly pathetic and not so full of himself, which matches then nicely with, so you have the patheticness level of Koinosuke increasing, and at the same time you have the level increasing of the wanting for justice for the dojo. So because you see them being more and more obnoxious and disgracing the art of Aikido more and more, and you see Kurosawa reminiscing and thinking about how pitiful all of this is, and you see basically the stage play that they're doing. So the Koinosuke gets more and more pathetic, and you also want the fraud to be brought up and exposed more and more, and this just rises in tension, and it all explodes in this fantastic panel where Kurosawa flips the katana and just hits Koinosuke on the head. All this tension is released in this one single panel, and honestly, at that point, the arc could have ended. But of course, as we know, it is still being translated right now, and it is only about the halfway mark of the story. So now it gets into how, even with that happening, Kanbayashi was still able to somehow sneak his way around, grasping every straw that he can, similar to how Muraoka tries to do everything no matter how despicable, to get what he wants while never putting himself in danger. Koinosuke is like, oh, Kanbayashi, why don't you do the duel? But he's like, no way, you have to do it. We have to go talk to your mom and convince her. So he is super determined, but also incredibly pathetic, and never wants to get himself in harm. And we even get a few panels, and I love those, where you have the classic Fukumoto distorted faces, where Kanbayashi is trying his best to get the situation back. And I must say, maybe it's foolish of me to put Shin Kurosawa in second place because of the bad comedy. Maybe it is foolish because I have not fully read it yet, because the translation is still ongoing. Maybe if we revisit this topic in maybe 10 episodes, my opinion will have changed. But right now, as it is, with the Aikido Dojo arc having hit its halfway mark, I'm getting classic Fukumoto vibes of it during a time where, it's also a little bit because of the asynchronousness that it was only being translated right now, but we're getting a little bit of this classic Fukumoto fix from this series that is being translated right now, which maybe artificially increases the amount of how much I'm enjoying it right now. Of course, I was not there while it was being released, so all these outside factors put it for me in number 2 and make me be confident in this positioning, even though I may have fumbled a little bit trying to make my case for it.
Yeah, that's okay. I am very interested to see how the rest of Shin Kurosawa will play out because, like you said, I think we're about halfway through the story. In terms, no, I'm talking about the translation. The English translation is halfway through the whole story. And from what I have heard, maybe I'm incorrect, but I've heard that the Aikido arc will sort of continue towards the end.
Yeah, the rest of the series is just the Aikido arc.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what will happen with the Aikido arc, because I get the impression it should be over fairly quickly once they have that showdown. But then, clearly other stuff is going to happen and it's going to continue on and on down that vein. Okay, so let's bring it back to me now.
Yes.
Maybe just slightly in the interest of time, but also because because when it'll be your turn again, you'll have your number one, right?
Yeah, so now it's
I'll just I think
I feel like our number one may be the same, but it's just
like I said, I don't really have a number one, but right now. So I'll complete the rest of my short list, and then you can say your number one, and then afterwards I can maybe think about what are my top three, and could I put those top three in order as well. So so what else is in my short list? I've just said Burai Dengai, I've said Gintokin. And next I will say...
We talked about the Kaiji, all of Kaiji also.
Well, I was going to say that later, but because it might be number one.
Okay.
Let's talk about Kaiji. Let's talk about Kurosawa. Kurosawa.
Okay.
Kurosawa, I'm actually thinking it might not be my number one because there is something that I find to be a bit of a weak point. But let's talk about the strong points first. So what I liked the most about Kurosawa was sort of specific things and specific things that were said and specific things that happened. So there are a few standout quotes, for example, when because it's such a random turn of events. Okay, so that's actually the thing which I consider to be a weak point. So it's the fact that and literally Kurosawa says this himself. There's a panel where he says this is right after he defeats those 5 kids that were harassing him and ambushing him. He goes drinking after that, thinking, I just completed that. Now my life should be very happy. But then he's actually not happy. And he says, my life has no coherent plot. That's what he says. And I think that's kind of true. It kind of goes from random event to random event. Like he's fighting some delinquent kids, and then he's friends with one of the delinquent kids, and then
actually quite similar to
and then he has like a disagreement with a colleague at work and it culminates in them having a fight. Well, it wasn't really much of a fight, but you know what I mean.
It starts off with the bento boxes, right?
Oh, that's even before. I'm talking about Ono, when Ono is thinking he's tougher than Kurosawa. And so it kind of goes right, and then attacked by the school kids again, even though he beat up Nakane. Like what are they doing after they defeated their top guy? So it's and then he ends up like drinking and then associating with the homeless. Like he doesn't have to, he can just go home like, all right, bye guys, but then he kind of gets involved in their so I think what makes it, in my eyes, just for me, weak, maybe not my favorite ever, is the plot kind of, it doesn't have that sense of growth. We're going on to the next thing, like a sort of, maybe logical progression is the wrong word, but a kind of an orderly progression that makes sense to me. Instead, well, it's a bit like real life, isn't it? Like a lot of random stuff happens in real life. You randomly meet some person, you get a job here and you get a job there, and then you randomly discover some new hobby. It's like a bunch of mishmash that doesn't make sense.
Suddenly you record a podcast.
Exactly. What I think I do like manga and just stories in general, which have a bit more of a linear progression. Just the kind of progression that kind of makes sense. Maybe I'm a bit simplistic in that way, but I think I like Gintokin, Burai Dengai, and Kaiji for that reason. Like the story kind of has the sense that it's
Yeah.
going somewhere,
Yeah.
and it's going somewhere in a way that makes sense. It's not
Yeah.
just, oh, suddenly we're gonna fight some kids, and suddenly we're gonna be friends
I-
with the kid, and then suddenly we're gonna get attacked in the toilets while taking a piss.
You know, people tend to shame Shin Kurosawa for jumping around scenes so much, but honestly, putting it this way, it has been the style of the series already in the original Kurosawa.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's what I don't particularly like about Kurosawa, but what I do like is just certain individual moments. Like, yes, maybe the transition from one scenario to another
Yeah.
is strange and questionable, and how did we get from here to there?
Yeah.
But once we are here, once we are there at whatever moment we are at, some amazing things can happen, or some amazing things can be said. For example, when Kurosawa, again, he just randomly, after he got beaten up by those three kids
Yeah.
with baseball bats, he just randomly goes on a train trip to somewhere to. It makes sense to be away from it all. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing you might do in real life, but again, in a story, it's kind of strange. But anyway.
Yeah.
He says that he read a book, and then in the book, those animals were proud to be alive just by the act of running away, they were being what they were. They were surviving, and therefore they were winning. But he's a human being. He doesn't just want to survive. He wants to live. He wants to follow his dreams. He wants to live in society. He wants to be respected and connect with people and relate with people and so on. That really resonated, because when we live in a society,
we live in a society,
and maybe you can find a place to live, maybe you can get food, maybe you can have enough money to buy clothes and stuff like that, but are you truly satisfied? Usually no. Usually people have something that they want to strive for, and they also want to relate. They want to they want their interpersonal relationships to be a certain way. They don't want to be like an outcast or a freak, even if they can survive that way, even if they can live comfortably as an outcast or freak or someone that people will look down on. They still want to have some kind of level of prestige, some kind of level of not just like in a sympathetic, friendly way to relate to other people and connect to other people, but also to have like a little bit of pride, a little bit of status. Like, oh look, I work at this place. I was educated at this place. Oh, I do this, and like a certain sense of pride. So that was just unfortunately. Not only are we kind of running out of time, but also my memory is failing me a bit. I can't think of lots of different quotes, but there's a lot of really.
We can talk about it at the beginning of the next episode.
Kick the can down the road. Wait till the next episode. But yeah, just like a lot of. So just to summarize what I said. Maybe the transition from place to place is a bit strange, in my opinion, and doesn't make sense in the way that I would expect it to make sense. But once you are in those places, then it really amazing things can happen.
I am quite surprised. I am very happy that you put the original Kurosawa this high. I thought
Well, I have to. It's one of the more meaningful works.
Yeah, in general, I'm surprised that your list has not been so Mahjong-focused. I would have expected it more to go down that way, but okay.
Oh yeah, so I was going to say the rest of my short list. So funnily enough, the next one is 10. And 10 is obviously a manga which is Mahjong-focused for the...
You don't have to go into focus too much. I think I'm spoiling it right now. I'll have a lot to say regarding 10. Maybe you have some other ones on your mind. At the end, we will be talking a lot about 10.
So just a quick sentence to say why it appeals to me. Even though I did say before that I weigh, more meaningful things and more, thoughtful things higher than just entertainment. Well, first of all, 10 is so entertaining and so exciting that I can't, even though I consider it less, it's still it is so entertaining and so good that it is going to have an impact on my choices. Like I said, and also, okay, so you're going to talk about it a bit,
Yes.
and maybe we'll have a bit of a back and
Yeah,
forth
yeah,
later. But
exactly.
of course, so not only is it like does it have that meaningful, thoughtful angle towards the end, particularly, but also the mahjong itself is so pushed to the next level. Like
Yes.
that whole thing with the chankan and if you remember when 10 pawns and then chankas, just ways of playing that
Yeah, yeah. Never think of
you would never
yourself.
think of that in
Exactly.
when just
Exactly.
playing on tenho and on in real life, just friendly matches and stuff like that. You'd never. Yeah, so they're really
Yeah.
pushing the game to its limit, really being
Yeah.
very thoughtful and creative with how it's played, and not only that, the whole ganpai thing, how they set it up to kind of be not very obvious, and then how Harada turned that on its head. Okay, I also want to say that I think my favorite character is actually Harada because the many characters have a kind of specific skill. For example, Ginji with his ganpai, what's it? Soga with his ability to see the darkness of mahjong or whatever.
No, he eats the
And
tiles. Obviously, that's why he's so fat. Okay. Yeah. No, let's continue.
Anyway.
You can read all about that in the Soga spin-off if you have forgotten that it exists.
Anyway. Harada, what I like about him, he's just so logical. There's no flow. He doesn't think. Well, he doesn't seem when we see his inner monologue. He doesn't think so much about flow. He's just so logical. Two moments in particular stick out. The ganpai moment when he figures out Ginji's ganpai and turns it on its head with the rice from the sushi, and also towards the end when he's up against Ten's Tenpai in the final hand in two-player mahjong, and he's just relentlessly using all the logic he can. He's like a bloodhound that's got the scent of his prey, and he's doing everything he can, pushing logic to his absolute limit.
I'm actually quite surprised that the dynamic between Harada and Hiroyuki is not explored further, because I feel like the way that Hiroyuki wants to play, even though Hiroyuki wants to play like desperately like Akagi, but he will never be able to play like Akagi, the just full-on logic approach is perfection with Harada.
Well,
but it doesn't really go into their dynamic too much.
I think Harada has nothing to say to Hiroyuki because number one, they're on different sides, and number two, Hiroyuki is just like young and naive. Even though you say he is very logical, you do see he has like good logical skills.
He's nowhere near with. There's a reason why Harada is the captain.
The thing about Hiroyuki is even though he does have a great sense of logic, logical thinking, he is too emotional. He's not. He lets emotion get the better of him. Like
I have a great metaphor.
Go on.
Harada is the Magnus Carlsen of the Fukumoto Mahjong universe.
Is he? I don't know that much about chess.
Okay, the people who may know may agree. While Akagi is more like a Bobby Fischer type.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just Hiroyuki is when something doesn't go his way, you see him kind of struggle and waver. He's not determined. So it's not just that he lets emotions like fear get the better of him, but it's also he doesn't have experience. Harada is very experienced, not just in mahjong but also in human psychology, and Harada always keeps a cool head. Yes. So I think that's something that makes them very different. And also Harada sort of is more brutal as well, obviously, when he pulls out sword, and so that I think that helps him a lot in just regular regular gameplay as well. He's not a kind man. He just wants to crush his opponent. Whereas Hiroyuki, I think I get the sense that maybe he's searching for something more than just winning.
Something. He's third rate.
Third rate. He's like Morita at the beginning of Gin Tokin. Sort of underdeveloped, naive. He doesn't know who he is yet, and he wants to find out. I think that's what kind of character Hiroyuki is, even though he's a logical thinker still.
spoilers for Hero, the man who suppresses the dying wishes of Akagi, the very end. So maybe skip ahead like 1 minute if you don't want to hear it. But I just wanted to add the comment: we do actually maybe see this dynamic explored a little bit because of Harada's son. And how, because I feel like their playing styles are quite similar.
Well, I do think that the hero in the Hero manga and Hero in 10 are two very different people.
It's a discussion topic.
And I'm not saying that's because of like a failure on the author's part, or but I'm saying he's developed just like Morita from the beginning of Gintokin towards the end of Gintokin. I think there's been a transformation.
But let's not talk about it too much. I promised 1 minute, so now we go back for the people that skipped ahead that didn't want to hear.
Sure.
Yeah, it was just a little thought that came up. Do you have any words to the rest of your shortlist before we spend the rest of the time talking about 10?
Hold on. Is there just anything else I wanted to say about 10? I just wanted to say that the Mahjong itself was very interesting and entertaining, and I like the logical thinking of Harada. I like the way they push the game to their limit, not just with the way they play, but also little things like Ganpai and, human psychology, and the way that it's set up. These kind of 2v2 battles are kind of uncommon in real life, I think, so that was very interesting to explore. Anything else? No, I think I'll leave it there. I think we'll have more of a back and forth later, because I'm guessing it might be your number one.
Maybe.
The gentleman never tells. Okay, so I think I'll move on to the next thing in my short list. And actually, now that I think of it, I think I've left it for last for a reason. I think it is actually my favorite. Well, it's about the dangers of these so-called legal drugs. Very interesting exploration of a topic that... No, I'm just kidding. That should have been an honorable mention, though. That's a banger, that one.
It is.
No,
best work by far.
That's your number 0.
Yeah. After 0 and 0 too, of course.
-1.
Yeah.
Number minus. Anyway, I would say Kaiji as a whole is my favorite, even though I'm just not a fan of part 6, part 5, part 4 is okay, I guess. I'm meh. I'm very indifferent about it. And then part 3 is quite good, but less meaningful than parts 1 and 2, in my opinion.
We need to have this discussion at a later point. My opinions are vastly different.
Okay.
I love Kaiji with all my heart. It is, but yeah, I think the ranking of the parts will be worth its own discussion. Yeah, but my opinion vastly differs.
I think should we talk about 10 and then we'll go over Kaiji?
So you're thinking that's what my number 1 spot is?
Is it?
My number 1 spot is obviously the man of truth, the lucky day Shintaro. No, it's not. It is 10, the nice guy on the path of Tenho, which also receives probably the award of the most misleading title a series has ever had, because it's like for the first 3 chapters it is about 10 and his 10 hoes, and then it just completely diverges. But I do actually have
10 and his 10 hoes and 2 wives.
Exactly. Oh my god. You're saving that for a good moment.
I thought of it on the spot, man.
Brilliant.
That was pretty good.
I can actually add on what you mentioned. Everything you mentioned about the Mahjong is just pure peak. It is, I feel like, the most raw, true. It is not like for Hero, for example, it feels like everyone has like their superpower, and while for actually 10, everyone is truly skilled and has skill, and it is not like, ooh, my arms are super flexible and I can just deny taking your tiles, or I can see your little twitching in the eyes, so I've studied medicine so much that I see through all the tiles.
I actually did like that part.
That part is actually, it is.
It was cool. Maybe not realistic, and maybe maybe not like
Yeah.
meaningful, but it's
But
cool. It's kind of like reading superhero
exactly
manga.
exactly
Now,
exactly.
this guy is Flash. He's super fast.
I-
This guy has superhuman strength. He can crush
exactly.
metal.
I'm not gonna lie, for a brief while the translation was being finished, I was actually thinking, damn, Hero is super kino, but then like with the ending and everything being a little bit rushed, it needed a bit more time in the oven to cook a little bit more. But for being the mangaka's first mahjong story, I think that's excellent. But for 10, yeah, it doesn't have to rely on this superhero of the week kind of superpower of the week kind of chapter by chapter structure, but everyone is just so powerful and threatening in their own way, and the mahjong that is being played is just, I feel like it is mahjong in its purest form. You know, for Akagi you have always some shenanigans, you have the blood, you have the hole that you grab in, the transparent tiles, you have for Kaidi the minefield mahjong, you have the in Gintokin the money mahjong, while just for 10 the East-West war, it is just okay, it is still a 2v2 battle, but a lot of it is just about the logical thinking and the thought process. And then of course there is
there are variations on the rules. There is 2-player on, and there's the clear mahjong where you have to clear the 5 yaku, and also, you know, vampiric mahjong where you can only lose points but not gain them. So there are variations to the rules, but I do agree.
But there are still less, it's not silly, but there's not too much fluff.
Right, it's less gimmicky.
Yeah, it is all games that you can play yourself also if you want to. You don't need a blood donation, you don't need a giant black hole where you can grab your tiles. So I love that it is just pure mahjong peak. Then I mentioned at the beginning, I love the mentor and student relationship, which we not only get with Hiroyuki and a little bit Akagi and a little bit of we get like it with on multiple levels, because from the perspective of Hiroyuki, he like looks up to all of these people, and he has a little bit of a different dynamic with all of these characters. He interacts also with Ken. We haven't even talked about Ken yet, demon of Osaka. Such a awesome character, and but actually he shines a little bit more in Hero, I would say, when he makes his comeback. I mean, he has a little bit of a backseat role in 10. But I love, like I mentioned, the mentor-student relationships that are explored. I even love the first few chapters where it is silly. You know, I like my comedy, and I feel like I get my fix of everything. It is like the perfect package. I get my silly, goofy, early Fukumoto era Growing Pains kind of series at the beginning. I get my pure mahjong action, character developments, character interactions, mind battles that are unparalleled with any other series, and I get the philosophical part at the end with the I mean, spoiler for the end of 10, but I mean, I mentioned the title of the hero manga, so with the death of Akagi and all of the characters reminiscing, and there's honestly not a there's maybe only one character that is a little bit in the background, but honestly everyone who takes part in the East-West Mahjong Underground War is such a recognizable character. The one guy I'm thinking of that maybe is a little bit less recognizable, but he gets his time also then again in Hero, at least a little bit. I even forgot his name, the monk. What's the monk's?
Kanamitsu.
Yeah, Kanamitsu. He's like...
He's in... he's in
only a little. He's mentioned, but you know, he doesn't get his time to shine.
In a flashback.
Yeah.
I think he's seen in a flashback.
Yeah, and then it's like, and that's why I was like, oh, okay, I remember this guy, but maybe it was too far to say, oh, he gets his time in the line. No, he does not get it in Hero. But not every character can be fully present and fully explored in this.
But I do think it was a bit of a shame that. Because, for example, I guess Soga and Ginshi, very significant characters, but I guess they got old, you know, maybe they're like in retirement homes and stuff like that. I do think it was a shame that Harada was barely mentioned. I know, we see him in, like, spoiler alert, you see him in the last panel, and you see him, he was involved in negotiations or something like that. But it's a shame that we never really got to see him. It was quite cool to see Washio though.
Yes.
With his disciples.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 10.
But anyway,
to summarize,
we just started talking about Hiro, but let's go back to 10.
And I can summarize it because you mentioned, I fully agree with everything you mentioned, and in addition to that, just to recap, it has everything I want from a Fukumoto series. The silly part, the awesome mahjong and mind games, and the awesome gambles, and the philosophical part at the end, and all the character dynamics and interactions. So yeah, it just left an impression with me, and I actually rank 10 as my favorite manga of all time. Even it is peak fiction.
Okay,
that's all I have to say.
That's all you have to say. Okay, I think, have I said everything I wanted to say?
Yes. I mean, kaiji, right?
Yeah, just about 10.
The big kaiji in the room.
About it. Is there anything else I wanted to say about 10? I did mention sort of Harada's character and how it's different from Hiroyuki, even though they're both, their ability is based upon
logic,
really strong logical thinking pushed to the max. And then there's 10 himself.
Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about 10 himself.
10 himself, well,
I love him. It is honestly, and he gets elevated. He goes through this entire a similar arc, maybe not fully like Morita, but I feel like 10, he starts off as a guy who doesn't really take things too serious. He is pretty naive. All he can do is a silly little trick with his 10 wires for the Tenho, like this little preparation that he has.
I think that's on purpose. So you might remember in the very first chapter, he, he's playing and then he wins, and then he was in Furiten, so he has to pay Chombo, right? I think that was on purpose to kind of make people let their guard down. Because
you're right, he's already
he knows exactly what he's doing, I think, because if you remember when at the very beginning of the manga is at one point, and then when the East and West battle starts, that's only like 1 or 2 years later, maybe 3 years later. But I do remember that
you're right.
When he was scouting for Ginji, he had a flashback to when he was younger. He had fewer scars, and he was like, I was going around the parlors. There was no one left for me to beat. I was doing pretty well. But then he met Ginji, and
you're right. I was just thinking about his few quarrels, but which make him so likable for me, where Hiro just thinks he's a complete slacker who doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
But then you have the duality of him actually being already
holding up the Christmas tree. Oh, you mentioned the slacker. You were going for the like mahjong ability angle. I was going to say as well. He held up that Christmas tree for hours just so they could have a nice Christmas, that family.
This is exactly what I was referring to, not fully relating to the mahjong skill was there from the beginning, even though I feel like it probably has grown also from his interactions with Akagi, maybe a little bit.
Obviously, a really moving moment was when Sawada gave that whole interaction after the gamble for that shop. When he said to that man who he had saved, "Go away, I want to be alone." And then Sawada cut him up, taking the risk of being seen, and just giving him shallow cuts. Maybe in the eyes of his higher ups, it might be seen as being too lenient. He could get in some trouble himself, and then accidentally 10 tripping and hitting his head, and then Sawada actually being very concerned and saying, "Are you okay?"
I like
and calling an ambulance.
Sawada was also happy that he had actually a larger role in Hero than also.
Very moving moment, in my opinion. So, and that sort of shows the kind of character that 10 is. He likes to like joke around, like flirt with his 2 wives, but at the end he's very, very strong. He's willing to do difficult things.
You were getting a little bit personal and talking about like the kind of life that you idealize, and how you, like when you were reading this, when you were like relating to Morita, for example, when you were reading it when you were young, and like using it as a little bit of a point of relatability, and like thinking about, oh, this is something, how I want to live, also talking about the Kurosawa's way of thinking. For me, the 10 is actually also like, I would go as far and say that I'm like striving to be like this, to never lose this easygoing side, even at the very end when he's talking to Akagi. He's like, hey, you can live together with me and my 2 wives, and it is like not something that he lets go of or something. This side he always has, and his character in Hero is also always a little bit cheeky, laid back, but when shit hits the fan, he is just competent, and but he's not so caught up with him being serious and always talking about. He's also not rambling so much like Akagi and being like, oh,
yes,
this is like hell.
Yeah,
he's not losing himself in metaphors. He keeps it real.
He keeps it real. Exactly.
He keeps it real.
He doesn't have time to think about lofty questions. He's just enjoying life for what it is. Doesn't really think too much about it. But that is a form of philosophy. In and of itself, don't worry, just take it easy,
just
man.
Be.
Just be. That's a good way of putting it.
Just be. If you just want to jong, be like Penchan and just jong all life.
But despite having that easygoing nature, he still has some strong feelings. Yeah.
Can't believe we talked about 10 at the very end, where we're like, what have we not yet mentioned? The guy who's on the cover.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll have to swiftly move on.
Yeah.
To Kaiji. So, and when I say Kaiji, I'm mainly referring to parts 1 and 2, because it's one of the first animes that I ever watched. So, of course, this is, my top 3, Wizomi's top 3. Everyone has their own personal takes and ways in which they're biased. I'm not necessarily saying it's objectively, although it is pretty significant and well known as far as Fukumoto works go.
For a reason.
Yeah. But so it holds a special place in my heart, because probably one of the first animes that I ever saw was Kaiji. And it actually got me into like more manga and mahjong and stuff like that. I was at a young age when I watched Kaiji, and there was something different about it. There's something that felt very real about it. There's so much fake stuff in the world nowadays. Someone is like singing a song or making a movie, but ultimately all they care about is just the money, right? And the message of Kaiji. And also, it seems really honest, like, I am sick of all these people, degrading themselves, doing all these things just to make money, what's the point? Kso. I hate it.
Kaiji embodies this honesty.
Yeah.
And what makes you really feel this more with part 1 and 2 compared to the second half?
I think it's because of the... Well, maybe it's because it was like novel for me. It was new, fresh for me. Kaiji being just a young, I guess I resonated a little bit, a young man that doesn't fit into society, doesn't really want to, because on the one hand, now that I think of it, there was that scene in part 1 where he was thinking about, every time I've wanted to, every time
Which scene?
Dude, should we just continue this later? I'm sorry.
This sounds like no.
Cut it off and
No. We can keep it in because we can let people know that there's a lot more left to discuss on the topic of kaiji itself. It is honestly way too huge of a box to open up at the very end. So
we're finishing the episode here, are we?
It is quite difficult to just summarize with
it is a huge series to cover.
Absolutely.
So maybe that's a good segue to the topic of our next episode. Now we know what it will be, right?
Yeah, it will be all about kaiji. I think that sounds like maybe we'll switch up the title.
Yeah.
Kaiji Man. It was the first series that taught me that in fiction people can lose. That people can lose.
That's another thing that's so real about it.
That like when part 1 ended and kaiji lost everything, I was like, huh? This can happen. And most importantly, Kaiji Part 2 introduced the best character that has ever blessed fiction in and of itself, Haseso Ryosu. So this is also a character, such a clandestine and well...
I think we could devote a whole episode talking about Haseso Ryosu.
Who knows? If our...
Okay.
Yeah, if our audience wants it or not, maybe it's coming. We pull the ropes here. Guys, I think also maybe looking at the time, how much did we record?
Well, yeah, so if we are indeed gonna...
this is a perfect time.
If we are indeed gonna cut it off there, sorry, audience, that I ran out of steam towards the end, but I think this way will be better because we're already at an hour and a half. Yeah. It seems.
This is also a limit of like a time where
people
are running out of steam.
We don't want to put you through too much. Okay, we want to be merciful to our gracious viewers. So thanks for watching. Do you have any final thoughts, Wizomi?
Yeah, no. Thanks for listening. Tomato, thanks for the discussion also. You gave me a lot of insights.
My pleasure, likewise.
Yeah, especially thinking about Guy, that was... And I was honestly also quite surprised by your picks. So also to the audience, we did not discuss our picks beforehand. So this was the realest form of discussion you can get, as always, with Jongers by Nature. And... yeah, I think if any one of you guys are inspired to give some of your favorite picks in the comments below, feel free. But other than that, we've been Jongers by Nature, and we see you all in the next one. Cheers.
Bye, folks.